So it looks like the world is finally kind of standing up to China in a good way. So if you don't know, the Chinese government is extremely corrupt. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, essentially rule the whole country with an iron fist. They monitor everything that their citizens do. There's cameras all over the country to watch what they're doing. They have like a social credit system in place. You can basically ruin your entire social life with just a few mistakes. The internet there is extremely censored to the point that like anything critical of the government is basically washed away off the pages. And the punishments that they do put against people are absolutely nuts. Now, one thing that the Chinese government does is if like a company wants to kind of incorporate or do business in the country of China, they essentially have to give all of their working trade secrets to the government. Meaning that if, say, a phone company or something wants to go and do something in China, they basically have to give like the blueprint basically to their phone over to the Chinese government. And a lot of these communications companies are basically in really tight-knit with the Communist Party over there that runs the entire country simply because that's how they really get to do business. And with that like real close tie that they have a lot of the time, the Chinese government uses that and basically extorts that in order to monitor people and to spy on people. Now, I do want to go ahead and reiterate and bring this point up. The United States government, they spy a lot too. They spy on people all across the planet. The NSA, the Big Five, organizations for different countries, they do monitor, okay? So it's not like this is not something that happens in the West, but it is something to consider. So the world is finally kind of standing up to this idea that China has that they can kind of do a lot of this stuff and that they're going to, I guess, monitor other countries' civilians through technologies and things like that. So there's a company called Huawei, and they are like the second largest phone manufacturer on the planet behind Samsung and ahead of Apple. Huawei, they make a lot of technology. They're, of course, one of the tech giants of the planet, and they are in real tight cahoots with the Chinese government also. So they are kind of a threat in a lot of ways to the West, because if Huawei got their technology in the hands of all these people and they got it in the hands of government officials and things like that, the Chinese could hypothetically use that connection to spy on the rest of the planet and to spy on other countries' peoples and things like that. And of course, the United States and the West, they don't really want that happening because the Chinese and the West do not align politically, and it just wouldn't really work out in anyone's best interest. But Huawei is facing increased bans and competition from other companies and countries around the world. So as we're starting to roll out 5G technology, Huawei was actually a very big player in the global 5G race. A lot of countries were actually going to allow Huawei to basically have a say in it. They were going to give them market share and allow them to do business in their countries with 5G technology. And as Huawei has basically been exposed for having such close ties to the Chinese government, a lot of countries are just straight up saying that that's not going to happen, and they're banning that from possibly happening. The country of Australia, they were kind of one of the first to do this. Back in 2018, I believe, they banned Huawei from having any connection into their 5G technology as it started to roll out because they didn't want Huawei to basically be, monitoring through 5G people's data, phone calls, things like that, and basically getting their information, which could then be viewed and maybe manipulated or used by the Chinese government. But then, of course, the United States, which is probably the biggest country at this point to do something anti-Huawei/China here, Huawei is basically banned in the United States. Their technology is not really allowed to set foot here in the US. And the ban here in the US is actually pretty serious. Like, I'm pretty sure Huawei phones are not allowed to be sold in the US. Their telecommunications devices and whatnot is not allowed here. It's deemed a national security risk because obviously the US and China are the two superpowers of the world. They kind of are political opposites. So Huawei basically can't step foot in the US, and not only that, they can't really work with US companies either. They can't work with like Google or anything like that to build up software and licenses and kind of develop infrastructure for their platforms, which is pretty serious. And this has been in effect pretty much since about, 2019. That's when the executive order from Trump came through. And honestly, I pretty much agree with the ban. I think that more countries should be banning this too because, who wants the Chinese spying on all their citizens? And of course, as we start to roll out 5G and that technology starts to become like a mainstay / the norm, companies like Huawei that have the ability to get into that technology are going to be trying to do so because it's such a moneymaker. And Huawei being one of the biggest tech companies on the planet definitely wants in on the piece of pie of 5G, you know what I'm saying? They want to get a slice too. So their communications with the Chinese government, though, should not be overlooked because, next thing you know, if Huawei's out here, building data towers for 5G in the United States, they're definitely going to be keeping logs of the data that goes through that. They're definitely going to be creating some sort of infrastructure to monitor those things. And once again, a company with such close ties to the Chinese government probably shouldn't have that. Now, once again, like I said, the US, they are also the same way. They spy on other countries, they spy on their citizens' phone calls and things like that. The NSA, they do work, man. Now, the thing is Huawei has kind of gotten their way around this here in the United States. They've been able to get like these temporary licenses that basically allow them to work with existing hardware and put out updates for software and things like that, which means that they're not like fully banned, unable to do literally anything in the US. But I mean, the possibility definitely will be coming through soon, especially as 5G becomes once again the mainstay. Now, this ban here in the US lasts until next year. And on top of that, the US is not the only Western country. As a matter of fact, the UK literally just announced that they're also banning Huawei technology from their nationwide 5G infrastructure as well. So what was basically going on, Britain was kind of taking it a little bit different than the US. Like, the US said no pretty much immediately. We're not allowing Huawei to be inside of the 5G infrastructure of the country. But not only that, we're kind of trying to get them all the way out. We don't really want Huawei doing business here in the United States. Now, the UK, as they were rolling out 5G and they were starting to build up their infrastructure for it, they were actually going to let Huawei have their own market cap, and they were going to let them have a limited role in everything. As a matter of fact, Huawei would have been capped out at about 35% of the market share for the 5G market, meaning that, you know, they wouldn't have become like the mainstay. They wouldn't have been like the Google or anything of 5G, but they would have had a pretty decent market share. They could have become like a third of the market, basically, and they would have had access to the critical 5G infrastructure of the country. But the UK kind of reconsidered. They also saw the security concern, and they said, you know what, I don't really think we want to go through with this and risk this. This doesn't seem like a very good idea. And they also now have banned Huawei from having access to the 5G technology of their country. So we're talking about three major countries on planet Earth: Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom, banning Huawei from being involved in their 5G tech, which is going to be extremely profitable, and it's going to be exponential over the next few years as it starts to roll out. And apparently a few other countries are actually considering doing this as well. It seems like especially the West is starting to really see Huawei as a security concern for the rest of the world because of those ties. Now, it's not like this is anything light to take, okay? Because once again, Huawei, they're one of the major tech companies on planet Earth, and these bans really are significant for the company. Like I said, 5G is it's going to be important for most companies that are in this field going forward. You know, Google, Microsoft, companies like Intel here in the United States, it's going to be important because it's basically replacing 4G eventually, and there's a lot of money to be made in it because pretty much the whole world has to roll this out and kind of update. So Huawei being banned from such major markets it's taking an impact. As a matter of fact, there was a report that said that when the United States basically sanctioned Huawei and banned them from using their technology, it actually had a pretty severe impact on the company and its viability. So, I mean, even if Huawei is huge in China, which it is going to be and continually will be because of the ties that it has with the government, having it cut from such markets, I mean, you got to think about it like this, right? What are the populations of all those countries combined? It's a little over 400 million. It's like, I don't know, 415, 420 million ballpark estimate just looking at the numbers off Google and adding it up in my head. I mean, that's a pretty significant portion of the world's, 7 billion, 8 billion people? But even then, there's places like India, which just banned like 50 Chinese applications from their phones, including TikTok, because they fear that it might just be tied in with the Chinese government real tight and be spying on people once again. Now, if you haven't seen my video, TikTok basically got exposed for being spyware, and of course, the company has really tight ties with the Chinese government as well. A lot of the companies in China do because, I mean, once again, you kind of have to in order to do good business there, but the app is definitely very shady, and the way that it acts and behaves is even more shady. I mean, it tries to like kind of throw you off if you try to reverse engineer it. It captures data on things that shouldn't really be captured, I guess. So India doing something like that, which is, again, one of the world's biggest countries, just indicates that the world is kind of looking at this shit going on from China and like it just being almost like, we really don't want to deal with this. We don't want this going on with our people. We don't want our people being spied on by the Chinese government, which is corrupt, and they're just kind of taking action against it. So, I mean, if you think about like the globe, the population, the amount of people that have seen their countries kind of take a stand against Chinese companies and Chinese intervention, in like the last 2 years, it's probably crossing nearly 2 billion. I mean, that's like a quarter of the world's population that's seen this, and just recent actions being taken against these kinds of things. Because, I mean, India has well over 1 billion people. The US has like 330 million. Great Britain is like 67 million, and Australia is like 25 million. So this is going to continue to happen too. I'm pretty certain about that. I think that in the coming weeks, months, years, we see more countries going, oh, hey, we don't really like what the Chinese are doing. if anyone's going to spy on our people, it's probably going to be us, because we know what we want to do with that information. Hey, let's go ahead and take action against that. And I think it's really going to start hurting Chinese tech companies, because I mean, it's one thing if like you target people in a specific country. I mean, like if a restaurant chain, just wants to stay Americanized or whatnot, that's fine, because, you still have people to cater to and do business with. But if you're a company that has the magnitude of Huawei and, you're basically now being restricted down to a smaller and smaller portion of people, which of course China is ridiculously large as is, it's still going to be harmful on your company in the long run, because as technology evolves and things like that, companies really want to do their best to expand into other markets and try to become globalized, because they make more money, they have more control over more data, and it's generally just beneficial. But with a company like Huawei basically being fought back against, it's going to start taking tolls on these companies. And not only that, but it might even continue to strain relations between the West and China anyway. I mean, the US and China already are pretty cold in relations because of things going on in like Hong Kong, the whole COVID-19 pandemic, the ideologies being different probably doesn't help either. But I mean, who knows, China might start taking action against American companies and forbidding them from doing any business in their country, which of course could really hurt them as well. And it can really lead to some crazy things going forward. It could be definitely very impactful, and I think it's something that people should be aware about. But with all that being said though, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel. Follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at SubTheOptimus. Make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. Thank you to my channel members. Your support helps my channel tremendously. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, banning Huawei from his household and signing out.